Naughty boys in nasty schools, headmasters breaking all the rules, having fun and playing fools, smashing up the book tools, all the teachers in the pub passing round a ready rub, trying not to think of when the lunchtime bell will ring again.
Hey!
That's good.
My work here is done.
Suggs is in the house. Oh my gosh, you have no idea. Do you know what, Sarah? Can you take it? Because I'm just going to be too much of a fanboy. I'm going to be like too much of a fanboy.
Well, listen, do you know what, Suggs, if it's okay with you, I would just like to start by asking you, before we talk about the wonderful album, Can't Touch Us Now, the stuff that you've probably been hearing over the last few minutes there, in terms of our debate and white working class boys and why things aren't going so well for them and they aren't achieving as well as other boys from different backgrounds. Is that something that you recognise? Is that something that was ever thus?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean...
What was your aspiration at school? What did your parents
Well,
say?
it's funny you should say that. I mean, I had a bit of both, you see. I went to live in Wales with my aunt for a bit, and I passed my 11 plus, which they'd faded out in England, but they forgot to tell the Welsh. And I went to the grammar school, and I saw that bit of my life where half of my classmates were left at the bottom of the hill, and it was one of those strange things where the grammar school was actually literally at the top of the hill. And I remember at that time, even then, thinking this didn't seem very fair. I really liked what your headmistress, what's her name, Kenny, was saying just as I came in, which is, I think, education to be more specific about the individual needs of each pupil. And I know that's a very complicated issue, but I don't think streaming or separating people at an early age is the answer for sure. But, you know, hey, I'm no politician. I don't really know why this is happening and what you're talking about. But what the answer is, you know.
Yeah, it's why it's the fact that it's boys, though, and not girls. That's the thing that kind of keeps ticking around in my head as well. Why are boys struggling so much?
You know, when I came back to London, I went to a big comprehensive, and my academic career went downhill quite quickly. And I think I was part of that generation. You know, we were James Dean, you know, rebels without a brain. Or whatever
rebels
it was,
without
a
clue.
Yeah, exactly. Just rebelling about absolutely nothing other than what trousers your mate was wearing. And the idea of education just had no interest for me, really. Although I wasn't stupid, and I've come to education later in my life, I completely understand that notion that it doesn't seem cool, you know, and how do you change that attitude? If school doesn't seem cool, then it's very hard to...
Did you have a job to go to?
Well, I just had odd jobs like everybody else. You know, I worked in a butcher's for 6 months. I did a bit of painting and decorating. No, I didn't have a job. No, I mean, I was very fortunate personally. You know, the Can't Touch Us Now thing, you know, the title of our album is that, you know, those people who do escape, I have the greatest respect for. You know, the people, I mean... I remember towards the end of my educational time was thinking, you know, the really coolest kids were the five at the front who'd actually managed to concentrate with all this anarchy going on behind them, you know, desks being set on fire and classrooms being disorientated. And there were 4 or 5 kids at the front who did concentrate and actually got an education. And I now, in hindsight, think, well, they were the ones who I should have more respect for than all the idiots who were sort of kicking off at the back of the class, who at the time, you know, I wanted to hang around with, and, you know, I aspired to be like the cool kids, you know, which were the ones who pretended to have no interest in education.
Yeah, I remember that well. How old were you when you came back to London?
I was halfway through the first term. It was a strange period because, I'd been in Wales for 3 years. I came back with a slightly Welsh accent, you know, halfway through the first term. You can imagine the sort of reception that I got. But, you know, and I was so busy trying to fit in with all the hard kids that I kind of drifted out of the educational side of things, which is a shame, you know, a real shame. And, I mean, it's such a bizarre thing. I mean, so many people say, don't they, there was one teacher that turned my life around. You know, I never had that, unfortunately. And it does tend, I hear more often from sort of posh people that they had that opportunity. You know, when I think about the poor old supply teachers who are trying to look after 35 kids throwing desks around, you know, you wouldn't want that job in a million years. And I think it's one of the hardest jobs in the world, being a teacher. I have the utmost respect for them.
But could you have had that outlook, so because you wrote the songs that you wrote without having that? I mean, you know, if you'd been with the studious kids at the front, baggy trousers would not have happened. Really.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, my mum always had books at home. You know, I always had a relatively good, words, relatively good amount of words in my head. You know, I think that's very helpful. You know, to have some kind of conversation, a capability of conversation. You know, but English was something I was always pretty good at. So I would say it's a kind of a contradiction to say, but whatever I did learn, I think did help the fact that when I came to writing songs, you know, I'd had some kind of literal upbringing.
Because you do tell stories in your songs. I mean, you're a storyteller as much as you are.
Yeah, but and I remember, my mum had books like Graham Greene and Anthony Burgess and people like that. I was reading those books, so even though I wasn't doing an awful lot at school, I was building up some kind of, whatever the word is for having a lot of words, erudition, something like that. And I think that does help writing songs. Yeah, I think, the more words the more chance there is of expressing what it is you're trying to express.
How come your mum was into Graham Greene and Anthony Burgess? It's just her thing.
Yeah, she was very good at English herself. I mean, I don't think she had a particularly good education, but she won prizes for her English. And, she always had an interest in books, and that was a big outlet for me, I think, definitely.
Were you in the corner of the playground observing what everyone was up to? Were you right in the well, you said, of course, as secondary, once you came back to London, you were in the thick of it, weren't you?
Yeah, I suppose I've always been a bit of an observer. And, I remember when I was writing Baggy Trousers, which is one of the first songs I wrote, when I got to the chorus thinking, well, it wasn't all bad, and having this kind of revelation that suddenly that the teachers were having it just as bad as we were, and
that is a revelation, isn't it?
To have some kind of sympathy. But I remember there was that song, what was it? Teacher, leave them kids alone.
Yeah.
Pink
Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall. Yeah.
And I remember even at that time thinking, kids leave the poor teachers alone. Yeah. So to find some way of balancing what was a pretty unpleasant time for me at school with the fact that I don't think it was any easier for the teachers, no.
Right, we are listening to the great man that is Suggs, of course, lead singer of Madness. We're going to be keeping Suggs with us for, at least half an hour. I'm going to try my very best to keep you on for... you're in for a long haul here. We're going to be talking a lot about the album, because we haven't delved into that.
We're going to move on to the demise of the fishing industry.
That's about 2:15 we're getting into fishing. We're going to do a live link
that
up.
We'll do a live phone-in.
We're going to Grimsby for that one, and we'll talk about that.
We'll take a look at 40 years of wonderful music and plenty more to come from Suggs, and the new survey which claims that the music industry is damaging musicians' mental health. It's Afternoon Edition on 5 Live.
Good afternoon. You are listening to Afternoon Edition on 5 Live, of course, with Sarah Brett and me, Nihal Arthur-Naika. And a very good afternoon to you. More importantly than all of that, though, is the fact that Suggs is with us, lead singer of just one of the best bands ever, Madness, without doubt. I mean, let's just hear the new single from the album, Can't Touch Us Now, which is released on the 28th of October. And this is called Mr. Apple.
Head of the table at the Rotary Club, never unsure of which shoulders he should rub. Scout leader, a pillar of the judge, capital punishment, he wants to bring back the budge. Of course he does, 'cause when that old sun go down, heading off up the wrong side of town, eyes sparkle in the red light glow, trouser pockets, he's ready to go. Calm down, Mr. Apples, you're gonna do.
The album's out now, Can't Touch Us Now. If you're a Madness fan, you're going to love this album. True return to form, it has to be said. Suggs, still observing the people around us. Mr. Apple, a figment of your imagination, layers upon layers of people that you've met before, or one singular person?
A bit of all those things, really, yeah. It occurred to me a little while ago. I was talking to someone in France, and I suddenly realised it may be quite a British thing, but there seem to be great swathes of the upper echelons of our society who are always telling us how to behave, but behave in a completely different way themselves, It's that, during the day on some committee talking about prostitution and drugs and stuff, and then by night cavorting with those very same things.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Well, it just struck me, it must be a very exhausting way to live your life.
Yeah, well, just going beyond the pale for the research purposes.
Exactly. Anyway, it's only a bit of fun, I mean, it's like Monty Python's did it years ago. It's like the judge wearing the stockings and suspenders, It's just that strange sort of, I suppose the repression of British life means that people explode in different ways, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to be having a lot of fun on this album. I mean, the album that came out 4 years ago or so, not easy to say, oui, oui, si, si, ja, ja, da, da, didn't get as great reviews. This one, I think, is being much better received. Does that mean you creatively are in a much better place?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, the album before the Wee Wee album was called The Liberty of Norton Folgate, and that kind of put us back in the frame, in terms of people's perception of the band. And then the last album maybe was just a sort of intermediate, and then we worked a bit harder on this one. Yeah. Having seen the kind of reaction to Norton Folgate, we thought, well, let's try and put that sort of effort again into this record, and I think we have, yeah.
Yeah. Why did you split up in the first place, Madness?
Health reasons.
You were sick of each other.
There you go.
I love that line. I love that line. When I read that, I laughed out loud.
I just throw them up in the air and he hits them.
There you go.
That's how it works here.
There you go.
So,
yeah, I mean,
though,
we've just been around a long time, I mean, we've known each other since we were kids, and I think it was just healthy that we had some kind of break from each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I think nowadays probably you wouldn't have said we'd split up. You'd just say you have a couple of years off.
A hiatus or
but
something.
we were working in a still kind of like what was kind of like the 60s, you'd make an album every year, 3 singles, a tour. You're probably at home for about 2 weeks a year for about 5 or 6 years. We got tired of it, and in some ways I think it was a good thing, because certainly for me it meant I was plunged back into whatever the real world is. And, having a few years out of the pop business, I think it's good for anybody. I don't think it's a great thing to spend your entire life in.
You're only missing Cal this time round, Cal
Indeed.
Smith.
Indeed.
I spoke to him not that long ago about his most recent album. What's it like? I mean, he's a wonderful lyricist, a key part of the band, but what's it like being without him?
It's difficult. It's strange. Every one of the band has a sort of hiatus every now and then. And because there's 7 of us, the machine keeps stumbling along. But, you never know what's around the corner with this band. That's one of the great joys of it.
Yeah, I was reading an interview where it said, your publicist said, well, you're not going to get them all together in one room, so, you're going to have to
Which is
just part
just
with
as
one
well,
or two of them.
apparently,
Yeah.
because you're uncontrollable when you're
Well, that's
together.
it. Recently a couple of journalists said, could I interview the whole band? And they said, no, definitely not. No, because you will not get a word in edgeways. We're all quite extrovert people, and
You're like a family at this stage, too.
well, very much, yes. If somewhat dysfunctional family, yeah. I mean, that comes back to what I said. Some of the band have known each other since they were at school, so it's a very intense relationship. But it's also strange. I mean, I think unlike a lot of bands, we're a democracy, so everybody has their say. We can spend 2 days arguing about what trousers we're going to wear, never mind what we're going to record on the album. And but it does mean that when we do agree to do something together, then it's a very wholehearted process, and it's
it's really meaningful,
full of energy. Yeah, for sure.
And that's exactly. I spoke to Roger Taylor yesterday about the Queen on air stuff, all the BBC sessions that are coming out this week, and he said exactly the same thing, that if you really believe in the band, that it has to be a democracy.
And and it has to come with a few arguments if you're not prepared to put up with the occasional argument. On top of that, all 7 of us write songs, so, it's a very, very convoluted process getting to recording an album. But, as I say, once we're all there, then it's full of the sort of energy that people come to recognise as madness.
And you had to find that energy naturally, isn't it? Because it must have been pretty tiring being that happy all the time for the public.
Well, sure. I mean, and that's, you mentioned earlier the first splitting up, which was probably in the mid-'80s or somewhere around then.
Yeah.
It was partly that, exactly. When you're going on funny French television programmes where semi-naked women are holding giant blow-up bananas and the director's telling you to be wacky, you start to sort of wonder about your own sanity. And so, we got to a position where people just wanted us to be funny all the time, and we went right the other way. We started writing songs like Yesterday's Men and One Better Day, and we got to a rather dark place. But having the break from the band, we came back in 1992 to do the Finsbury Park thing, which
Madstock.
75,000 people turned up to, and we suddenly realised, that Madness have always been a bit of both. It was Neil Tennant who taught me the word pathos. I never knew what that meant before, but it's that mixture of happiness and sadness, and that's really what we've tried to do all throughout. I mean, it's not, we're here to cheer people up. People pay good money to come and see us live. We're not going to let you down in terms of entertainment. But at the same time, we are not just a gang of fools. We might be stupid, but we're not foolish.
What's your exercise routine? Because I was watching on Sky Arts recently one of your live things, and the amount of energy that is in a Madness live performance. Because, you know, no disrespect, but you're not in your 20s anymore, right? So what is your exercise regime and the band's exercise regime?
Well, like everybody in this country, I join a gym in January. I go until about halfway through February, and I'm still paying now for that gym membership.
I never been there.
But singing and dancing, you know, is pretty good exercise. Yeah, singing and dancing. I mean, we're on stage for nigh on a couple of hours, you know, and that's pretty good exercise, you know, with all the other stuff that goes with it.
No yoga, Pilates?
No, not really, no.
Pilates.
That'd be amazing if Suggs ended up
Pie,
doing
latte.
Yeah,
I thought it was a pie and a latte.
legs.
Oh, is that the kind of
I had a
exercise
pie.
to have a pie with a
Pie
latte?
and a latte.
That's the new classic London combination.
There we go.
London must have changed, though, even though you still hang out, don't you? You still hang out around Camden an awful lot, but you must have seen a hell of a lot of changes in 40 years of music making from that area.
Yeah, well, I mean, London always has changed, you know, and that's one of the joys of it. I mean, I do think there's a worry now. The money is kind of changing it in a way that is a bit irreversible. I mean, you know, for all the other changes, it seems to me like when I was a kid, one area would go up and another would go down. I mean, for instance, in Camden Town, there were squats, you know, for your younger viewers. They were empty buildings that you could inhabit.
You just used to live there.
Just get the electricity on and get the band rehearsing in the basement. So I think the room to manoeuvre for young people is a lot less. I mean, my kids say, Dad, you go on about what Camden Town used to be. There's a lot of Irishmen, you know, and pubs. I don't remember seeing a girl in Camden Town till about 1981. But now we can get coffee and cocktails and all that. So what are you moaning about?
Pie and lattes.
But things move on. You don't want to just be a grumpy old man. And mostly I like change, you know, and I like the fact that London changes. But I do think just the money thing, you know, I don't know how you regulate that, but I think that's the sort of thing that has to be dealt with right now, is affordable housing, yeah, without going on and on politically. Is a big problem in London. Now, you know, a lot of artistic people moving out, you know, all the time I'm hearing about people moving out, and I think it'd be a real
Moving
shame
to Brighton.
if London, or, you know, all sort of Bristol,
Wherever.
all over, yeah, anywhere, basically, you can afford to go. But it would be a real shame if London just turns into some kind of tourist museum. That would be a real shame, yeah.
What about how the music industry helps people who have, you know, mental health issues? Because it's strange, isn't it, Suggs, that so many of our artists, what makes them great artists is the fact that they are different, they are troubled, they have that kind of inner need to satisfy certain demons perhaps that they have.
Yeah.
You've been right at the heart of the music industry, you know,
Well,
top 20 after top 20 after top 20 and in that circus, haven't you?
It wasn't called Madness for no reason, do you know what I mean? As our promoter once said, if you wanted JLS, you should have booked JLS. But, yeah, madness comes with a certain madness. Yeah, well, you got things like Nordoff Robbins, you know, that fantastic charity that works with people, you know, disadvantaged people. And music is an amazing cure for a lot of different maladies, you know, and, you know, it's one of the great things about this funny little island we live on. We've created so much amazing music, and, you know, I think it's been our saving grace, really, you know, for all the madness that goes on around it. You know, music is the great unifier, you know, music is the one thing you can't quantify until you actually hear it, and it's a very whatever the word is, you know.
Did you do music or need music?
A bit of both, I think. A bit of both, for sure, yeah. You know, music came along. I mean, you were asking me earlier about, you know, did I have a sort of life plan? I certainly didn't, you know. And the great fortune for me was that I bumped into these blokes when I was about 15 or 16 who had this idea of making a band. And apart from being sacked a couple of times, I suddenly realised this might be something I could actually do, yeah. And I certainly had no idea that I'd be a singer or any of that. I just happened to be around at the right time. You know, and it's not, I mean, it's like that cliche, you know, I mean, from where I came from, you know, it was either sport or pop music, you know, pretty much were the ways out, you know, and I was very fortunate to have found that way out. And it's been, you know, the most remarkable privilege ever since.
Because you used to have a little tear up at the football, didn't you?
Well, I don't know about a tear up, you know. Yeah, I got chased a couple of times, yeah. But yeah, I used to go to the football instead of rehearsing with the band. You know, the football was a big passion.
Why you got sacked, was it?
It was why I got sacked. When they saw me on Match of the Day, I said, I've been to see my granny in Norfolk. In fact, they saw me on the telly. Unfortunately, the singer they had went on holiday, and I was the only one who knew the words. And they had a couple of gigs. Well, in fact, they had a gig in a flower shop in Hampstead. And unfortunately, they needed me, so I was back in the band, which is, really the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Is it true that you were banned from Top of the Pops 4 times?
It would seem that way, yeah. I mean, I say these things and they get quoted, and so I presume they must be true. Yeah, I think it was at least 4 times, yeah. You used to get in trouble, yeah, just for messing around and not miming properly. In those days they took
and getting
it very...
stuck in a lift with dancers.
Well, yeah.
Did that happen?
That's really weird, that story.
Well, I wouldn't say it's that weird. I mean, we were
There's a lot
red-blooded...
of furry things in there, weren't there?
Yeah, hot gossip, yeah, a lot of furry things. And who wouldn't want to get in a lift with hot gossip?
I didn't know it was hot gossip.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's different.
So there were 7 of us and 7 of them, and the lift only took 10, and it plummeted into the basement, and we were stuck 15 minutes before we were about to go out live with hot gossip. But who wouldn't want to get stuck in a lift?
You clearly deliberately made the lift crash.
Well, I can remember there was these metal stairs from the director's booth down to the studio floor, and you'd hear these boots come donk, 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 thinking, oh, here we go, we're in trouble again. What have we done now? And but we kept having hits, so they kept having to have us back, whether they liked it or not.
You once had a T-shirt, somebody wearing a T-shirt or had a placard or something saying, I need the BBC, and then it was ripped off to reveal like a hole in the head.
That didn't help.
That didn't help.
And also, you gave the television industry a roasting once when you accepted an award, an RTS, is that right?
Yeah, it sort of coincided with the end of my presenting career. And when I said I don't
Coincidental.
need... My work here on television is done. Yeah, I got a couple of awards, and, I had a couple of cold drinks, and I got carried away with myself. And, I shouldn't have been so disingenuous, but I threw the awards in the air and said I'm finished with television and walked off. And lo and behold, I was.
You literally never worked again?
Well, the odd bits and bobs, but nothing really to talk of. No.
What was it like to have been at that stage throughout the late 70s into the mid-80s where success was just pouring in? And then there's this fallow period, and actually quite a financially challenging period.
Yeah, well, it was very strange all round. It's very strange when the success came as quickly as it did, because it did. We were on Top of the Pops by the time we were 18, having hits, and then we just had hit after hit, and then we're on this kind of machine, And it's not so much you, it's the people around you and the whole kind of industry you've created and the people you're employing who rely on you to keep that going, and then there comes a certain point where you can't kind of keep it going. And it also coincided when the public fell out of love with us, which was handy, and we found ourselves out of work for a few years. But, going back to what I said, yeah, it was difficult, but it was also good, I think. All of us went back to ordinary stuff, our sax player was working on the bins for a bit. I'm not saying anyone should have to do that if they don't want to, not that it isn't a great job. But, I think it gave us all a reality check. And when we came back to the band, I think we all appreciated it a lot more than we had. And I think I appreciate it more now probably than I ever did, because every time I look at an audience, I think what a privilege it is to still be here, and we are still here.
Massive audiences as well.
Well, we play a lot.
Still filling arenas.
And festivals, just all these festivals all around the world. And obviously people who haven't necessarily just come to see Madness, it just seems to grow. And, I don't know, people drag their kids along, whether they like it or not, but children and grandchildren, I've seen 4 generations of the same family. And, it just seems to go from strength to strength. I mean, certainly I think, like I say, I do feel sorrier for young bands now. I think it'd be a lot harder for them to get on like we did, because there were about 10 or 12 pubs in Camden that you could play in, and you could rehearse for nothing. And I think the whole room to manoeuvre's got a lot harder for a young band, yeah.
I mean, those big crowds that you had, I remember going to Finsbury Park and, you haven't got a racist bone in your body. I mean, you venerate Prince Buster, for instance, and Jamaican ska and that, and yet this far right, groups of individuals. And I remember seeing the Anti-Nazi League and the skinheads facing off against each other, and we were outside Finsbury Park, and I just thinking, what is this all about? Where do these racists think that you're in any way writing anthems for them? Yeah,
well, that was, a very dark period, and certainly in the sort of early 80s, we had a big struggle with that. But, you can talk to the Selector or the Specials, they turn up at their concerts, you know what I mean? The fact we didn't have any black people in our bands is obviously something they could attach themselves to. But you asked the Specials or Selector, it just was... I mean, sociologically, it was because football hooliganism had really been stamped down on, and there was this kind of old NF thing that came in the sort of late 70s, and for some reason they started to attach themselves to the whole two-tone thing, and we got the sort of brunt of it. But, you know, all we could do was be on stage and tell them that, you know, they're wrong and listen to the music we're playing. And eventually it kind of fizzles out because, you know, whatever it became, oi oi or something, they went on to something else. Unfortunately, it seems to have kind of died down to a sort of manageable kind of sociological thing at the moment. I mean, you know, you never know, do you? I mean, look at the rest of Europe. I mean, the right is always there somewhere in the background. You know, every time there's a lull in the conversation, you just have to keep your eye on it, eh?
Having seen it at first hand, because I remember you recalling about seeing people Sieg Heiling at gigs and seeing, you know, there is a rise in hate crime now in this country. How do you feel about that? Do you think there are any parallels to what you saw back then and what you see perhaps today?
I don't think half as bad as it was back then, man. I mean, there was huge marches and all that. You know, I don't see any of that. You know, you see small pockets of people here, there, you know, kind of living off the back of this kind of xenophobic fear that we seem to have at the moment. But I don't see it half as bad as it was then, personally, you know, having lived through a few of those periods, you know. And you know, it's just a matter of education, and you can only do what you can do. You know, if people look to us, then they'll know that it's definitely not what we're on about, no.
100%.
We've talked about you being such a wonderful chronicler and observer of British life over the decades, and that really is at the forefront with a couple of tracks on Can't Stop Us Now. Pam the Hawk. Pam the Hawk is a real person, isn't she?
Yes. She was. Unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years. But, yeah, she used to be a beggar, or whatever the current vernacular is, around Soho. And she was enormously successful. She had this amazing knack, you know. Well, mostly you give her £1 not to give you a hug, because she threatened to give you a hug. But
she was only about a couple £100 a day, is that right?
Well, that's what they reckon, you know. And
wow.
She used to spend it all at the bookmakers or in the arcades on the fruit machines. Yeah, they say she would have been the richest woman in all of the West End. And she was an amazing character. Yeah, and on this record, you know, I just thought about characters. I used to write songs more about individual people, and I thought I'd do that again on this record. I wrote three or four songs.
Yeah.
And that being one about Pam, yeah.
Let's have a little listen to it now. This is Pam the Hawk.
She walked the streets of Soho every single day, from dawn till dusk. Always walks a different way, past every coffee bar, restaurant and pub, in her clammy green palm. She'd turn over and rub a few coppers, a nice handful of change, but for a fiver she can and will arrange a signed photo, a kiss, a nice warm hug, until over your shoulder.
Pam the Hawk from Madness' new album, Can't Stop Us Now.
Can't touch us.
Can't touch us now. Excuse me, my apologies. And there's a wonderful, well, it's pathos, as Neil Tennant would say.
Pathetic.
There's a wonderful pathos in that, as there is with a couple of the other tracks on the album, like Blackbird, which is a tribute to Amy Winehouse. And you've talked about how you met her just on the street a couple of days before she passed away.
Yeah, well, I used to see her around Camden. You know, I can't say I was a close friend of hers, but, you know, she was inhabiting the same haunts that we started out in, like the Dublin Castle and the pubs around Camden. You know, of course, it was tragic, and we all know about that, yeah. But, yeah, not long before she died, I was passing her on Dean Street in Soho, and she went, "All right, nutty boy." And it made me laugh, because I'm a 55-year-old man, and I haven't been called nutty boy since 1979. But as we all know, she had a great sense of humour amongst everything else. Yeah, and I don't want to be morbid, but I thought it just came to me, this song about her, and, you know, celebration of her life, you know, and I hope I did her some justice.
How are you feeling about going out on the road again and touring with this album?
Full of beans, vim and vigour. I'm very much looking forward to it. Yeah, it's great. We start rehearsing next week, and, you know, we play, I don't know, 5 or 6 new songs from the album. We don't, you know, obviously, I don't like seeing bands play a whole new album, but we're definitely going to give some of these songs an outing, and we're very proud of the record, and, yeah, we're very much looking forward to getting on the road again, yeah.
Who has sufficiently matured since you first went on the road, and who, as soon as you get back on the road, becomes exactly as they were 30-odd years?
It's a great question.
Well, I think we sort of take it in turns. It's a bit like a relay race, you know. We each take it in turns to blow it one night or the other. Yeah, pass on the baton of excess. But you know, we don't go on the road as sort of long or you know, as much as we used to. So we can sort of do it in short bursts now. Yeah, like the SAS, you know, in and out. You know what I mean? There's a few dead bodies around, and then we're off to the next place.
There must be some nights though where you all just go a bit mad. I remember seeing you at Electric Picnic in 2009 in Ireland at Stradbally House in Liège, and it was the same night that Brian Wilson played as well, and everybody was just on such flying form, and you guys, maybe you're always like that, but it just looked like you were having the absolute time of your life.
Yeah, well,
and I thought they're going to have a good night after this.
Definitely, yes. I remember we ended up in a bar with a sort of Irish folk band, and our brass section were trying to approximate Irish folk music. It's very difficult to do on a trombone, but we had a great night. Yeah, no, Ireland is very conducive to having a great time, I must admit.
It most certainly is.
You go on the road, and as you say, you don't have to do as many gigs now because you can do fewer and larger gigs. And you don't presumably have to try and create any of that excitement or energy anymore. It's just there, isn't it? Because you're just happy to be there again.
Yeah, very much. I mean, you know, we like you say, yeah, we mostly play arenas or festivals now, but we will go out of our way like we did this year. We played a few gigs in Scotland, slightly smaller venues. You do get a slightly different atmosphere. But, yeah, I mean, you know, the enthusiasm for what, you know, the enthusiasm we get from the people who come to see us really is what the energy is. You know, you it incrementally goes up. You know, you get into it, they get into it. You know, and over the years I've found it's a very simple process. You know, you into it, they're into it, and then you reach another kind of level that you wouldn't have. Well, obviously, if I was just performing in my front room on my own, I wouldn't get quite the same excitement I get from being in front of an audience.
And you're going to keep doing it, you've said, until you can't.
Well, as long as the knees hold out, that's the only problem.
And enjoy doing it, presumably, right? I mean,
very much. You know, as I say, it's a real privilege. And, you know, to be amongst this band I've known for so long and still be making music that I'm very proud of, yeah, I really like doing it.
Wow.
Brilliant to talk to you. Thank you so much, Suggs.
What about the fishing in Grimsby?
I know, right?
We'll do that on Twitter.
You were going to come back.
Afterwards.
Do a Facebook Live.
Over a pie and latte, we'll do that. Suggs.
Thanks so much, Suggs. The album is called Can't Touch Us Now, and it is out now. And there are some absolute belters on it.